Man Bishop, und. Welcome back, guys.
Hi, everybody. I feel like that's just our normal intro now. I just wait and expect you to do it.
I think over 60 episodes in, you guys know we're not like quite normal, so let's go with the flow.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Alex.
And this is Tiffany.
And we've got a fabulous guest for you today. She's called Lori, and she is an author, speaker, and certified fair play facilitator. Oh, that's hard to say. Who bridges corporate success and family leadership. After an impressive marketing strategy career, she embraced her unpaid career, managing family care while leading community initiatives. Her children's mental wellness advocacy earned recognition from Buckingham Palace.
Ooh.
And she's mother of 2 teenage boys. She now helps recognise and redistribute the invisible labour that often falls disproportionately on women. Through coaching, Lori creates safe spaces for families to address imbalances and transform household work from a burden into a shared source of pride. Hooray.
Ooh.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we're so
you're
excited
welcome.
to have you here, Laurie. But we know you've written some books as well, so maybe we could talk about that actually. That's always quite interesting. How many books have you written?
I've written one children's book. It is
Amazing.
called Our Home, the Love, Work, and Heart of Family. And it is my contribution to family conversations about the visibility and value of the unpaid work that we all do every day to support our family thriving. And it's really an opportunity to talk to your kids about this work, not as chores, dreaded repetitive work, but as actually the work of gratitude for all that we have and for those with whom we share a space. And it's not to suggest that this is all not a heavy load, because we know that it is, but the opportunity in sparking these conversations is really to foster a future of equity in domestic labor and this work for our children, where we know we currently struggle with that in the majority of grown-up relationships, and reframe families as teams and households as organizations where everybody contributes equitably.
I love that.
I love it.
Much needed.
Especially as mother of one little boy. I think, I'm conscious of making sure I bring him up so that he's used to doing, household chores, that he's used to, and I think we'll get into this, but helping. But is that the right way to frame it or not?
Right. It's so interesting because, we're guided so much at home by the definitions and the expectations and the language that sort of society has created, right, around this work, which is unpaid, typically unvalued, right, not counted in GDP or other economic indicators of our society. But we have the opportunity within our four walls to reframe it. And Alex, to your point, language is a huge part of that. And so it's so interesting you raise the word help, because this is something that I speak to families about all the time. Inherently, when mothers call for help, and I should say up front, this is a very gendered conversation, mostly because the majority of the research that we have about the challenges to women's wellness that household inequity really imposes, it is male-female relationships. And there is some insight into same-gender relationships, so I'd be very happy to talk about. But, typically the balance domestically is that women sort of hold all the work, we hold all the cards, and the rest of the family is sort of waiting in the wings to be called in when we need help. But this is not really a sustainable model, because what we see is that 80% of autoimmune diseases are being diagnosed in women, twice the instances of stress and anxiety, right? And it's because of this load that we carry, and it's because of the way it's positioned, which is that, women are called to lovingly and selflessly be in service of their families from dawn till dusk, and that we need to ask others for help. And the reframe opportunity here is really language that is much more collaborative. First of all, I'll talk about, like, a process for reframing this work in your family such that there's more equity. But really the language is, will you do this with me? Can we do this together? Can I show you how this is done so that you can take the lead? Are you interested in learning? Are you interested in owning? Let me tell you the benefit of this. Let me explain to you the why of this so you know what the benefit is to you. Can we do this as a team? Can we sit down and divide and conquer? So just talking to your kids, not about you needing help, but about the critical role that they have in the wellness of your family and the thriving of you all together.
I like that. And I think what it sounds to me is the impact of having this conversation, the impact of maybe changing our approach means that we can then build family cultures that supports everyone's well-being, because sadly, women tend to, because they carry majority of the workload, do burn out or get stressed. So I like the idea that we can sort of bring the family into it, but in a way that shows them that it's not just helping, but it's more because we're all responsible for this family, and everybody has a
Exactly.
role to play. Um,
Exactly. And a
yeah,
great starting point is to connect with your family. And I suggest that children, even young children, can be such thoughtful contributors to a
yeah.
conversation like this. But sit down and connect with your family to understand, what are your core values? What is really meaningful to your little family unit on a daily basis? When do you feel the most joy? When do you feel comfortable and safe in your space? What do you need to thrive? And then talk about how everybody contributes to getting you all to that place.
And I suppose also in kind of from a longer term perspective, it's also about what we're building in our children, because I always think ambition wraps around that. This is my ambition, right? My ambition is mainly focused on our ambitions and how we've evolved as mothers. But I do think the ambition we have for our children as well plays a key part. So that's something I'd love to actually get into now, because I think about, ultimately we want to develop children that are emotionally intelligent. We want our daughters to
Yes.
not just be, and not just live in society, right? We want them to be strong and independent, but we also want our boys to be caring and nurturing and potentially
Yes.
understand how they can support a partner in the future. So can we shift that to more of, because I know you're a mother of boys. Let's talk about
I
that as
sure
well.
am. Yes,
How do
yes.
you approach
Well,
that?
yeah. Well, so you just raised so many important points, and I want to touch on all of them. But you know, there's a very famous Harvard study that shows that actually there is a direct correlation between children as young as 3 getting involved in the work of the home and their success and thriving later in life. It develops their sense of self-esteem, their ability to approach, communicate, and complete tasks, and they're thriving academically and in social relationships. So there really is a direct tie to their own ambition and their own ability to succeed later in life. And you said, what are we telling young girls? What are we telling young boys? It's so true. We are really teaching the girls of today, girls can code, girls can fly. We saw recently, girls can be astronauts that fly to the moon. Girls can be president, prime minister. But what are we telling boys
Yeah.
about their role in nurturing and nourishing and the work of care? And it is something, I see a lot of my colleagues who, Alex, you mentioned I'm a fair play facilitator. So fair play is really a system for an understanding the scope of work in your home and dividing it equitably, which is terrific. One of the things I wanted to share was that in my Instagram, which is at Our Home, Our Pride, I share a lot about how I speak to my sons about their opportunity to contribute to the wellness of our family. And also, I break down these tasks and chores to not just make like a list of to-dos that are sort of in the way of them getting to all the things that they want to do, but so that they understand, no, these are things that actually impact me. So the example that I sometimes share is if I ask my 14-year-old to change his sheets, it's kind of annoying, right? But if I explain to him, hey, buddy, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but sleeping on a clean pillowcase really facilitates clear skin. And then suddenly he understands the why behind the task and the impact, not to me, right? Who's like suggesting that he take it on, but really to himself. And, you know, as a 14-year-old, that really resonates. And you can bet those sheets are off the bed in 2 seconds.
Bet, yeah. Yeah, I like that of framing it in a way that makes it beneficial to them, and you know, that they are understanding that they're not doing it as a favor to you, that actually it's a great thing for them to do for themselves. Especially, you know, when I was a teenager, that would have been a deal changer for me. Like,
100%. And you know, also like I'm sort of on the cusp here of having some independence, right? I know your littles are a little bit
Jealous.
younger, but
We're jealous.
in case you have listeners who have, you know, teenagers, it can be really meaningful to speak to them about how they're going to be thriving, you know, when they go off to college or when they go and live on their own. We tend to protect kids at this stage of life and let them focus only on their learning or their athletics or their creative pursuits or whatever it is, with the solitary goal of getting into college. But if they get into a terrific school, it's not going to be as meaningful if they don't know how to ensure their own well-being. And that comes from, you know, keeping their space like clean and organized and keeping their body nourished. And then, by the way, you know, when they want to invite someone over to share their space, it's really critical that they understand how to prepare that space in a way that is like welcoming for somebody else. So there are so many messages that you can share with your kids sort of all along the way. But, you know, to your original point, Tiffany, this learning is all directly tied to their later success.
No, I like it. I like that. I like that what you're teaching thinks about how everyone can be well in the family. And even it's something that I think about. I mean, I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, but I tend to kind of say, you know, Nana, don't take their dishes to the sink for them. I tend to say, you take your dishes. And I can see that they like it. And I think that sometimes we think giving kids an easier life, sometimes we think that's the best way. Maybe I think because we all have kind of different childhood experiences ourselves, sometimes we think giving them everything or protecting them or wrapping them in cotton was the best way. But I'm definitely seeing how, like you said, that sense of responsibility, they tend to actually like it. And I think, like you said, it's about thinking long term and how sometimes a little bit of responsibility, a bit of not necessarily hardship, but I think a bit of that kind of burden. I think it's not a bad thing in building resilience in children. And I think that's something that I always think about, because when I look back on my life, actually, a lot of having responsibilities has been really good to me. So I think it's just looking at it from that perspective and how in 10, 15 years, 20 years,
especially if you have support and encouragement in that responsibility, right? Which is what we're trying to foster. You want to set kids up for success, right? By matching them to tasks where you know they're going to be able to complete it and feel really good about it. You said something else really interesting that I want to touch on, which is sort of looking back at your own childhood. And when I'm coaching partners in setting the values and the standards for their own household, looking back at how you were raised and at the role models that you had in your own household is such a critical but very often overlooked step in understanding each other as partners and understanding each other as like folks that we share a space with. You know, if we come from different cultures, different family dynamics, even different countries or whatever it is, it's so insightful and impactful to how you live as partners that you understand how each other grew up.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, you can see, for example, I'm going to go and visit my family in Italy soon. And when I was younger and we used to go and stay with them, my mum used to expect, my mum's quite feminist as well. My mum would expect me to help clear up with my female cousins. But the men didn't do that in Italy. It's like quite a like macho culture. And I remember being absolutely furious about that. Like the fact that I was being asked to help, but my brother wasn't. And my brother is the loveliest person ever. He's like, oh no, it's fine, I'll help. He didn't just sort of sit back and let me do it.
Yeah.
But it was that expectation. And I think your example about cultures and people coming from different cultures, you might come from a household where the sisters are expected to, almost like wait on the brothers, which is not how I want to bring up my son. He's an only child. He's going to be an only child.
Yeah.
But I still want him to understand how, he's not here to be waited on hand and foot. He's here to be part of the family, to understand how to look after himself, and not think that things just happen by magic, that that dirty plate just flies away to be washed by the washing up fairies.
Yeah, totally. And to take it a step further, for kids to really be clear on, and this is another language thing that I talk about a lot, which is obviously, I think acknowledgement of effort is so important, but the opportunity to take it a step further than simply like saying thank you, which again positions it as like, whoever
you did me a favor.
Right, did me a favor. Right, exactly. The opportunity to very meaningfully address the impact that someone has had by their actions. So not making it about you being grateful for their action, but about how they have contributed, as we've said, to the wellness, to the flow, to the thriving by showing up in this way. Even something as little as clearing a dish. It's like important that they know it is so meaningful that you did that, because now I see you not only remember, but you're capable and you're growing into this role, because you used to only take it to the counter beside the sink, but now I see you putting it in the sink and putting water on the dish. And like, I just want you to know that that's like really meaningful to this family. And it takes it a step further than a simple thank you, which really kind of starts building the pride in the child.
And I think also when we spoke, I'd love for you to elaborate on, we mentioned about this idea of separating motherhood, like the relationship with our children, from caregiving, the labor tasks. I'd love to, for you to elaborate for that on our audience.
So yes, thank you. And this really relates to sort of societal definitions and roles as well, that I think before we take on learning a new way, we have to sort of unlearn, right? So a lot of these concepts that we are fed as mothers, like, women are better at multitasking, and mothers have a certain instinct, right? Like that makes them better wired to give care. Baby always wants mama, and all these things, which sort of on the surface are quite flattering, right? Like it's sort of telling us like, well, you're naturally so good, better at all of this stuff. But in actuality, it's really falsely empowering, and at the same time alienating men by suggesting that they don't also have these magical abilities, right? And the notion that motherhood and caregiving have always been sort of intertwined, we haven't seen society define fatherhood like that, right? It's been more like fatherhood and providing. And so it's the opportunity is really the untangling of those sort of outdated concepts and seeing motherhood and fatherhood as the relationship with their kids, and then caregiving as a separate role that we tackle together.
That's interesting. Could you break that down a bit more then? To, let's say, especially, I think a lot of our audience have, I think it's typically, let's kind of talk about people, young children, for example, which, would be helpful for Alex and I, and I'm sure other readers, so other listeners. Let's say you have kids between like 2 to 5. What task would you say are like the labor task, and what task would you say are relationship building that maybe we should prioritize? Because I think what this kind of feeds into is this bigger conversation about guilt, because we feel like if we're not doing everything, then we're letting our kids down. So what would you say are the things that we shouldn't maybe outsource because they are connection building, and what tasks would you think it's okay to let go of?
So the first thing I'm going to share is a statistic
Okay.
that women who work outside the home today spend more time in direct care of their children than stay-at-home mothers did in the 1960s. And
No
exactly
wonder we're exhausted.
right. Well, right. And Tiffany, you said it exactly. This is the result of the guilt and the shame that we feel for, again, not being in constant service of our families. And I think it's different for every family. You know, the idea that sort of outsourcing or accepting outside help, especially if you are in the stay-at-home mom role, which is like another a phrase that I would love to rebrand. We may not be able to tackle that today, but this notion that, you know, accepting help, you know, is like a sign of weakness, or like you're not as productive as you should be, and rest needs to be earned. Like, it's all sort of a fallacy that is really impacting women's wellness, and this is why we need to break this cycle. And you know, you were saying specific tasks. Like, I would say it's really different for every family.
Okay.
And when you come together and talk about your values, some of this will be revealed, right? You will understand the things that are really important to you as a family. You will understand your standards for those things. You will know which of them you want to tackle and which you will accept or seek outside support with. And you're also going to recognize a few things that you might be doing that you don't want to be doing, or you don't need to be doing. And maybe you're doing it because you think, well, people are expecting me to, or like, what if the neighbor sees, or what if my mother-in-law comes over and, you know, puts on the white glove and wipes the dust, like all the things that we're so worried about judgment and expectation. And so this notion that, you know, you can be open to accepting support, or, you know, if you have the ability, paying for support, or if you have lovely grandparents who are involved, or whatever form it takes, you know, this concept of it takes a village is truer than ever. And women, especially who have ambition to work outside the home, it's a huge opportunity to see that your role is not to carry as much of the load as women do globally, which is, you know, 75%. 75% of the executional work is done by women. A higher number than that we see as it relates to the mental and the emotional load, which unfortunately is so invisible, right? It's like this ticker tape that flows through our brains constantly of everything that we need to remember about our families, allergies, doctor's appointments, time of school pickup, all the things. And the only way to sort of shift the numbers is with a system in your home that you can use to achieve a more equitable division of labor. I shouldn't say the only way, a highly recommended way.
You know, it's funny talking about like outsourcing labor and stuff. So when I had Ted and we were at home, we had a cleaner. We don't have a cleaner at the minute, but we had a cleaner, and she would come and I would be at home with the baby and would typically go and like feed him and give him his nap and stuff like that when she was there. But I did think, well, I wonder what this woman thinks that she turns up and cleans while I'm here.
Oh, sure.
But I'm not doing it. I'm going to go upstairs, and like sometimes I'd still be in my pajamas when she arrived and stuff like that. And I'm not somebody who really dwells on what other people think of me, but I did think, God, I bet this woman thinks I'm really lazy.
And what she probably thought was, gosh, I'm really thankful for this job. You know, because the revenue that I'm able to generate in doing this work is what looks after my family.
And, you know, for part of that, I was either lying on the bed and watching a box set and feeding a baby while my house was being cleaned. I did get over the guilt quite quickly because it was just nice to like have a clean house. But yeah, I had to put that guilt and fear of judgment out of my head. But I think that's, you know, because I was physically there while she did it, I felt worse about it.
I totally understand that.
Do you know what I mean? That she must have thought, well, you're clearly not at work at the minute. Why aren't you doing this? But I think people I think people feel that all the time. about other stuff. So I felt particularly bad because I was there in the house, but I think people feel that anyway, even if they don't have a very new baby. I think they feel that guilt that they're not doing it all. And you really have to push back on that and have the cleaner while you sit upstairs.
But I think the lines are blurred. I think that's the thing about motherhood. The lines are so blurred. I think I don't know if you guys saw Jolie Burrow from Pregnant Then Screwed posted an article about how women who work from home tend to also work at home while they're working from home, when men typically don't do that. And it's interesting, isn't it? It's just like you're just constantly working. Even if you're trying to do your corporate or professional work, you still feel like you have to put washing on, or you need to, fill up the
Yes.
laundry. So I just think because of that, I don't know. I think it's easier said than done, but I think women being able to take a step back in the moment where you feel like looking after a child at that moment is work. And even though someone is doing your housework, it's interesting, isn't it? But I do think we just blur the line. So it's really hard not to do both.
And yeah, like you say there, Tiffany, I felt like it was my responsibility to be doing that because I wasn't going to paid work at that point in time. But I also found that before we did get the cleaner, I was finding it impossible to keep the house clean and look after a baby at the same time. It's just really hard. The cleaning side of things is not my forte. I have ADHD. People typically struggle with that side of organization. And I definitely, I would have really benefited from the way that you've reframed it, Lori, of my job was to look after the baby during the time. That was what I was meant to be doing.
To connect with the baby, right?
Yeah.
Even it's really, a mother is, and a father, it's really about the relationship. But you raised something so important, right? Which is that even in our own families, we all have a different and beautiful wiring, right? And ADHD is something that does require like consideration in the standards that you set for your home and for yourself. It's really important to understand and to be able to share with the rest of your family what that means for you, right? And this is also something that we're just starting to talk about more.
Yeah.
But when you sit down for the conversation about, connecting on values, it is so insightful to share, hey, and also I want to let you know about like some things that are a little trickier for me, or some things that I need to do a little bit differently, or like if the process could be A, B, and C, that would be really meaningful for me because of the way I approach things or the way I remember things or whatever it is. And it's so important. I look back and I'm pretty sure now that my dad had like a beautiful wiring like that. Of course, I didn't know it at the time when I was young, but I look back now and I'm like, oh yeah, it's so interesting to remember how he approached things and things that were complicated for him. And as a child, I was very often at his heels during tasks because he needed what is referred to now as like a body double to sort of shadow him and keep him on track and keep him accountable. And he couldn't have articulated why, but he just sort of instinctively knew that he would stay more focused if I was on task with him. And it's just such a relief to realize it, and even in our own family, like we're so different. We're all so different. And so it's really essential to come together and share these insights about ourselves.
Thanks for that. I think we'd love to also hear about your ambition, because I think that is such a cool wraparound at this point. Because I know that obviously you had an amazing marketing career before you.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear how that shift sort of happened and what led you to your current work.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. So I did have a 15-year career as a marketing strategist. I worked with Kraft Foods and Four Seasons hotels and resorts. And when I had my first baby, my first mat leave was through Four Seasons hotels. And I had my child in Canada, which is a 1-year maternity leave, which is a really beautiful thing. Also somewhat tricky to jump back into the workforce, but particularly for me, because my job at Four Seasons really involved a lot of travel, lengthy travel and far away travel, which was fabulous before baby, slightly more complicated after baby.
I
So
really relate to this.
Yes. So my husband and I chatted about the opportunity to move to a one income family and for me to shift from the economy of commerce into the economy of care. And I took, the same ambition, the same diligence, the same passion that I had applied to my paid career and applied that to my unpaid career. And I quite surprisingly, really enjoyed it and thrived in it. And because we had 2 international moves as a family, we relocated to London, England for 4 years, and then here to Chicago in the US, where I am now. It was a very fulsome I can't believe actually how quickly 10 years went, but I was so busy in this unpaid role, as you can imagine. When we landed in the US, we were told that we needed to sort of redo all of our foundational documents, our wills and our insurance and whatnot. And because we had absolutely no community of family or friends or safety net here yet, my husband suggested to me that I should apply for disability insurance, which would, help him to take a lead role in supporting the family if anything were to happen to me. And so I filled in all the forms and did all the medical tests. And guess what? I was rejected. And the insurance agent said to me, I don't understand why you need disability insurance. You're just a housewife.
Ooh.
And in that moment, I realized he has no idea what this role entails. And he said to me, because you don't generate a salary, if something were to happen to you, there's no loss.
Wow.
You don't.
Did he say this to your face?
He did.
Was this in person?
In writing.
Okay.
And he said, you don't fall on the algorithm, were his words. And it was such a bubble bursting moment for me to realize that this work of home and care and community simply is not counted. And I couldn't unhear it. I knew immediately that I had to be a part of changing this perception. But again, I was, quote unquote, a stay-at-home mom. I didn't have a platform for impacting corporate policy, government policy. I wasn't yet a trained coach or facilitator or anything. And I thought, well, what can I do from where I'm at to, impact this sort of misdoing that is coming from our society? And I thought, well, I can talk to kids. And that's what really inspired me to write this children's book, which is to foster a new future of gender equity and of value and visibility of domestic labor. And so I set myself out on a mission and began to study and read and write. The first thing I did was go on LinkedIn and create a profile for myself as a stay-at-home mom. It has evolved significantly since then, but I thought, you know what, if I want others to see this as work, then I need to begin to talk about it as work. And one thing I really encourage moms to do as they're at those early stages of new parenthood, we very often have the baby books where we're recording all of the milestones, every single one, right? That the baby, oh, they yawned, oh, they turned over, they blinked, they laughed. But we sort of in really focusing on that, we potentially can lose a sense of our own growth and development in this stage. And it's really important to be able to capture and articulate what this is in a meaningful way so that this unpaid period or this pause that women do take to focus on the caregiving role can be spoken of as the work and the growth and the contribution that it is. It belongs on a resume. It's part of our story. And it really does make us into more ambitious people in a new way. And I think research does show that it turns us into more efficient and effective workers as well.
Yeah, you've got to do it in all of those stolen little moments, haven't you? You can't.
Yeah.
The time you wasted before. And I think there's so much conversation now around mothers in the workplace and, the volume of stuff that they can get done because they have realised how precious time is and that really there should be more space for for high level but part-time work. And I think, a bit more of that space for women using those skills that they've developed while they're mothers. I think you're never going to have a more difficult boss, are you, than looking after your kid?
Children.
That's for sure.
The toddlers, the children.
And to layer onto that, what is also not to give women a longer list of things to do, but what mustn't get lost in all of this is our ambition for who we are as a person, aside from a parent, a partner, and a professional, right? Those things that truly make us who we are in the marrow of our bones, right? And so the idea really of working with your family to achieve a better equity of domestic labor in your home is to make this work take up less time and space overall for all of you, such that you do have that space to pursue what truly makes you who you are, what brings you joy, a creative pursuit, an athletic pursuit, whatever it is. This is such a critical piece of the puzzle that many women are missing. In fact, women have 5 fewer leisure hours than men per week, research shows us. And I say women, but it's a statistic that is measured in girls as young as 8, which is scary. And another reason why it's important that this conversation starts with kids, right? Because it's not just about equity in work. It's about equity in rest, equity in joy, equity in things that nourish our soul. And so it's really important that we talk about, that we be true about the need to our wellness of this time and space.
That is, you said something there about, I think it's interesting because there's a whole lot of conversation happening around power pause, right? I think it was Niha Rouge, you might know her. I haven't read it yet, but I know she talks about women intentionally, going on a career break. And I think what you've said there kind of puts a lens on it in terms of you're not just taking a career break. I mean, not that, obviously define as you want, not just to look after your child, but also in a way to develop yourself. And I think motherhood is leadership. I mean, I often say that my leadership lessons are gained before 9 a.m., like negotiating with a toddler, trying to get them to nursery happy and, fulfilled. And, it's just making breakfast, trying to make sure they're okay. And I think it's such a shame how society devalues like housewife work or household child related work.
That's right. The conversation becomes all about what we're stopping and not enough about what we're beginning, what we're starting. And it really is because so much of what goes on in the new sort of care role is invisible.
Yeah.
It's invisible often to our families because it happens sort of, as you said before, magically in the shadows, right? When others are asleep, when women are doing the second shift, either early in the morning or late at night, or it's invisible because we carry it in the mental and the emotional load. And so we don't really have, or we haven't until now had a meaningful vehicle for really talking about the scope and the value of all of this work. And so exactly, Tiffany, like the opportunity to talk and focus more about what we are starting in this new chapter is so, so meaningful.
I really like the fact that we are having these conversations as well, because I think, women have obviously always done this extra work since they've been in the workplace, but we were supposed to make it look easy, make it look like we weren't doing it. We weren't meant to talk about it. It was meant to.
About it.
And you were meant to show up at work like you don't have a family or kids, and then you were meant to parent like you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And it's just unreasonable. It's crazy that women have felt like they can't talk about this or complain about it because you've chosen to have children, but you didn't choose to sort of become an unpaid, like, cook and cleaner as well. And I think, for me, I'm in a relationship where I think it's relatively equitable, but I was still shocked by, that it was before we had our son. And I was still shocked at how much more I ended up doing than my husband. even though we're not
Yep.
super traditional in our kind of
Yes.
household roles.
And
I was really taken aback by that.
That is so commonly when partnerships see the big shift, right? Because when you move in with a partner and share a space, you do tend to sort of find like a nice balance. And then it's really when baby comes along, because again, men are taught sort of by society that this is really the woman's domain, that they have, again, the instinct for it, that they somehow have the training for it. And the reality is that men may have to do things a little bit differently. They may have to find their own ways for soothing a child. It may take them longer, but they are going to get there. They just need to want to do it. They need to notice that it needs being done. And they need to realize this is a muscle that they're building. Women are good at this stuff because we've been doing it.
Yes,
It's like
that's true, isn't
any
it?
other skill.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes I do think about even the shift between pre-motherhood me and now me. Like, you would probably think I'm quite organized, but I never thought I was an organized person, but I've had to be because I have children. It's not like as if I'm more organized than my husband. It's only because I do the organization more. So it's just,
Yeah.
I've become like that. But if I'd looked at me before, I'd have thought, you can't do that. So it is interesting, isn't it, how we kind of evolve.
And rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
I think it's back to that idea of when we met with Anouk and we were talking about money, and she said you wouldn't say, I'm not very good at driving if you couldn't drive, like if you've
Right.
not done your test. You'd say, I can't drive yet.
Yes, yeah.
And, I think that's the thing. You're not good at it and you can't do it until you do it. That's the only
Exactly.
thing that's going to help you get there.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really stuck with me because it makes total sense. I'm a really bad driver, but I've never learned.
But I'm also interested in you, Laurie, because I think because you're clearly a very ambitious person, and I do admire how you're able to you obviously see value in what you're doing. And I think for a lot of women, they might not have that. So is there something you can share about that, like your confidence in your role and how you're able to bring that, also create a legacy for the next generation to learn about unpaid work? Like, how do you find the confidence to do all that? Because I think some women do want to take maybe they're on a career pause, or they're thinking about taking a career pause, but they're thinking, oh, I might lose my identity, or I might lose myself in it, or what would it feel back to when you're kind of out of the workplace and out of that community? Do you have any tips for how they can maintain their own kind of confidence, maintain their own sense of value outside of like corporate work? Or is there anything you can share about that?
First of all, that's such a lovely thing to say. So thank you. And I think I really owe this moment of being so directly devalued in my face
Okay.
to the reflection and the research that has like gotten me to this point. And so that is really why I want to share with so many others. And I think it's just also the knowledge that, research tells us that this work that we do, mostly that women do, 75% of the work, and like more than that of all the mental and emotional load, is worth, were it measured, $10.9 trillion
Wow.
to the global economy annually. And I should clarify that that is even measured at minimum wage, which is probably like not even an accurate metric. And I think once you begin to understand, and also the fact that, the work of care is the work that makes all other work possible. We are raising the next generation of laborers. And once you give so much power to this work of caring, whether we do it full time, whether we do it along with our paid work, you do begin to feel so strong and powerful in this stage, not to mention the opportunity to reflect on how it is stretching you to, how it is growing and driving your own contributions and in your own evolution. And so I think once I started really talking about it, and also once I started seeing all of the impact of the inequity to women's wellness in the home and also in the workplace, right? When women go back to work, well, first of all, it's even difficult sometimes to go back to work because we now have software that filters out resumes that have a caregiving gap, right? And there's also what's called the motherhood penalty, which is when a motherhood announces a pregnancy in the workplace or has a baby, like the inference is that her focus on work is going to decrease because she's going to be distracted by the child. And so she is penalized in terms of how she is valued by the workplace. At the same time, a father is given a bonus when he becomes a parent because the notion is, well, he is going to be required now to provide at a higher level. So we have to support that. And so you see the inequity is everywhere, right? And you start, like, the light bulbs start going off, even in community, right? You know, who do hospitals have down as their first point of contact? Who does all the charity work at the churches? Who's the head of the parents association, right? All of this, like, unpaid labor is usually women. And I think when I did it for 10 years, it was really such a source of pride for me, a way to connect to my community, and I loved it. But the light switch really flipped when I recognized, oh wow, like, at the highest level, like, none of this is counted. And it really has propelled me into talking over and over and over about, no, this work actually is extremely valuable. What's visible is valued. And so we have to talk about the scope of all that we do, really in the spirit of the future of women's wellness and gender equity in the home.
Wow. Thanks so much for that, because I think that also fits in the conversation of women who do want to also return to work and how they perceive and interpret the time that they've spent out of work, because obviously a lot of that is important to how they will, for example, write their resume, or the confidence they have in interviews, talk about motherhood as leadership. But there's so much around this. I really think it's just such an important conversation to have, because there's just so many factors that can hold women back in that way. But I think what you said about the confidence of the value and actually looking at it from a financial economic perspective, I really think that is it 10 trillion?
$10.9 trillion
That's insane.
measured at minimum wage globally. Yeah.
I
And
definitely
I think
feel like it would be noticed if we stopped doing it.
well, this is it. And interestingly, a number of decades ago in, was it Iceland? I think the women went on strike for a day. And as a matter of fact, when I was young, my own mom went on strike for a day because I think she was exacerbated, by just that feeling of constantly depleting herself in care of the family and it not being, recognized and counted. And it's not, and this is tricky, right? When you do move away from the workplace and focus on the unpaid work, you don't have a year-end bonus. You don't have peer reviews. You don't get feedback on what you're doing. And it can feel isolating sometimes. And so it is really, really important to, again, as I said before, like, take the time to reflect and note. And sometimes it's hard to come up with the language. There are a lot of great resources out there to guide women on how to add a caregiving stage to the resume to show the impact. But Tiffany, like, I love how you constantly connect the word leadership to motherhood. It's really, really meaningful.
Oh,
and
it's
that kind of language absolutely should be showing up on resumes and in interviews. Now, we have work to do, and I have a lot of peers who are doing this at the corporate level for those hiring managers to be able to understand and accept these concepts, because they are relatively new in being communicated in this way, but we just have to keep at it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm loving LinkedIn at the moment, just because, I mean, for example, Alex, we both talk about experience with our children, what we do with them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe more women need to do that, normalize the conversations of what we're doing outside of work that is clearly developing us and our children. Because, I mean, like I said, example, you go from a child maybe not wanting to go to nursery and happily going to nursery. What happens between A to Z is some sort of negotiation that is useful in so many other scenarios. So I think it's about kind of really thinking about how we can translate that better. But I really do think it's just life changing, and it does help you to develop yourself.
And imagine if men spoke openly and outwardly about the caregiving that they were doing during the day. This is a huge opportunity for leadership in the workplace, right? To be more open about any connections that they may have to giving care during the day. I think very often you will see like a calendar is just sort of blocked off, right? You like, but people don't say like, oh yeah, I'm leaving early because I'm coaching my son's soccer team, football team, or oh, I'm taking the day off because I'm moving my mother into an assisted living facility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we felt more secure to be able to speak that way too, because work is really a family too. But we're so afraid, right? It's really vulnerable to say, there's something else I need to focus on too in my life, or I really could use support because there's something that's distracting me right now, or I'm emotional about something that's happening in my caregiving role. There's a huge opportunity to support one another in the workplace too. And what happens, I do a lot of coaching and workshops for office groups and ERGs, because at the end of the day, there's an inextricable link between folks who have a better, more equitable situation in their home. They're coming into work able to better focus on those efforts during the day, right? And so this is all connected. So the more that the workplace can support people in their roles in care, which it could be care of children, it could be care of aging parents, it could be care of an unwell or a disabled family member. There's so many things that require our emotional energy. We would be better, more efficient workers if we had that support.
Yeah, that's right.
Definitely.
That's right.
Definitely.
Wow, this has been amazing. I think we'll start to wrap up a bit. But
I could hear some background daddying going on.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, but I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad. I just scared him. I burst into the room, and the times we've had to re-record my ambition, it's like it looks like we have 60 episodes. But like I said, I think we've recorded about 150.
Oh dear. It adds to the authenticity.
Absolutely. I was going to say, Lori, where can people find you online?
Oh, thanks so much. So I'm on LinkedIn, Lori Sugarman-Li, and my Instagram is at Our Home, Our Pride. I would love for you to check out my children's book, which is available in the UK, and it's called Our Home, The Love, Work, and Heart of Family. I really hope that it will spark some meaningful conversations for families at all stages. Even if you don't have littles, I hope it can inspire you to connect with your family on reframing this work as an expression of gratitude for those with whom you share a space.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll add a link for the book as well to the
That'd be great.
Spotify.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, Lori, it's been an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for today.
I appreciate the chance to connect with your community.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been really lovely talking to you. And thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
And if you could also, look, I'm remembering to do this, Tiffany.
Like.
If you could all like the podcast.
Smash the like
follow
button.
the podcast. Smash the like button, as Ted would say. And leave us a 5-star. Obviously, only leave a 5-star review. But leave us a review.
There was a review. Thanks so much, guys. Take care. See you in the next one.
Thanks. Bye.